Now, because you know how the readability formula works, it's sentence length and polysyllable words, you might be tempted to get rid of polysyllable words by using abbreviations. So using abbreviations will reduce the percentage of complex words in your text. But I suggest that you don't do this as a strategy. Using a few abbreviations, one or two key abbreviations, that's okay. But when you start using abbreviations for every complex term, it really puts a heavy burden on your reader to understand what's going on, because they have to remember all of these abbreviations, and that's not easy to do. So I have a quote here from Steven Pinker about too many abbreviations. He says, "The writers forget that the few seconds they add to their own lives come at the cost of many minutes stolen from their readers. I stare at a table of numbers whose columns are labeled DA, DN, SA, SN, and have to riffle back and scan for the explanation. Dissimilar affirmative, dissimilar negative, similar affirmative, similar negative. Each abbreviation is surrounded by inches of white space. What possible reason could there have been for the author not to spell them out?" So I'm not going to give you a lot of examples of too many abbreviations, because I think it's pretty obvious just from this quote what the problem is. But let me give you one example. And this is an example from one time when I was writing a publication. I found a similar publication in my field, and I thought, wow, this will be great for a compare and contrast to the results that I have found. And so I sat down to read this paper, and I was bombarded with paragraph after paragraph just like this one. Furthermore, 86 QE interactions for alkaline tolerance index were found. 17 for LR, 16 for FWR, 17 for DWR, 18 for LH, and 18 for BS. A total of 77 QE interactions for the original trait indicator were detected. 17 for LR, 14 for FWR, 4 for DWR, 21 for LH, and 21 for BS, as well as 3 epistatic QTL for BS. I'll be honest with you, I wanted to read this paper, but I didn't. I didn't finish reading it because I couldn't. It was just too much work for me. I couldn't read all of those abbreviations. I couldn't remember what they stood for, and they were just presented as list after list like this. And so, to be honest, I gave up on this paper. I didn't finish it, and I didn't cite it. Now, we've talked about a 7-step process for improving your text readability, but you also should think about visual readability. What I mean by visual readability is when you pick up the paper and you look at the page, is it something that your brain can see an organization and it can see spaces between paragraphs? Or is it just a big block of text that makes you think, oh, this is going to be hard to read. I don't really want to read this. Visual readability helps your reader, even though it's not in the words, it helps the reader to organize the material in their mind as they're looking at it and reading the work. So you should consider the visual readability at the paragraph and document level, in addition to focusing on the text content. Okay, this is a screenshot of 2 pages, and it has the exact same text. Don't even try to read these, but just looking at them, you can see that the one on the left looks more inviting to pick up and start reading than the one on the right. The text on the left, you see that there are gaps between paragraphs that helps you visually see the paragraphs. There are also subheadings within this results section that helps you visually organize what's happening. It's fully justified so that the lines are even and you see these nice square blocks of text. Compared to the document on the right, where there are no spaces between paragraphs, there's no subheadings, it's not justified at the right, and so it's kind of messy looking. So this is just an illustration of a few things that you can do. But when you're looking at your visual readability, things you want to think about are using formatting features such as italics, bolding, and underlining, using bullet points. If it's appropriate to use different colors, think about the margins, the spacing, the font size, and the font style. Some fonts are more readable than others. Think about the alignment, using boxes or lines if you have graphics, the placement of the graphics, and having enough white space and how that white space is distributed. Now, I'd just like to wrap up this lesson with a quote. And to set up for this quote, what I would like to make sure that you understand is I'm not telling you to do all of these things during your first draft. All of these tips I'm giving you in this lesson and in the following lessons are things that you do during your editing. So your first draft, you just want to get the words down into your computer and saved on a disk. And then you can start working on it. So don't edit as you write. Write first, edit later. And so here's the quote I'd like to show you. This is from Joseph Garland, and it says, "There is no good writing, only good rewriting." As we wrap up this lesson, let's look back on the learning objectives. And I want you to make sure that you can do all of these learning outcomes before you move on to the next lesson. All right, so the learning outcomes again were to define the term readability, to explain the components of text readability, to identify grammar and style choices that reduce readability, to edit sentences to increase readability, and to describe strategies to increase visual readability. All right, that concludes this lesson, and happy writing.